This is my crowd for my second speech. First off, I'm going to apologize because we've had some technical difficulties. I wasn't able to connect the computer to the TV, so we're going to have to do the presentation slides on this computer. Very sorry. Well, first I'm going to introduce you to one of the most influential athletes of any time, almost. You might recognize his most famous quote is, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, his hands can't hit what his eyes can't see." This is also a presentation that I'm going to be dedicating to him because of his recent passing. The legend that actually spoke those words is Muhammad Ali. He just recently passed around a week ago. He was one of the most influential athletes of his time, as I said before. My sources are biography.com. That's where I got most of his information. I was actually finding a lot of his information about his boxing career and that before then. And then I also got some of his topics for his civil rights activism and philanthropy through the History website. And then I also got his quotes from actually USA Today that they came out with 30 of his most famous quotes because of his recent passing. These are the three topics that I'm going to be covering over him. His childhood growing up and how he lived his life before he became really a famous boxer. His boxing career and the tosses and turns and roller coaster ride, that was his boxing career. And then even his philanthropy events that he did to help others, because he was also a very philanthropist, very good philanthropist. He who is not courageous enough to take a risk will accomplish nothing in life. And I think he really lived that out through his life. This was maybe not one of his most famous quotes, but I think he really showed this in his life and what he did with his career. My main point is taking risks through Muhammad Ali's childhood brought him to where he was today as a boxer and as a person in general. Most of course is actually Muhammad Ali was born in Louisville, Kentucky. He was actually born by the name of Cassius Clay, who then became a boxer in one of the most weirdest ways possible. He actually had his bike stolen, and then he had, instead of going and beating up the guy, he went and told the police that he was going to beat him up, and the police officer actually just happened to own a boxing gym and happened to tell him that he would be happy to train him through his earlier years of his life. He trained him all the way up until he was amateur, where he actually was able to get 3 or 4 belts. They weren't really sure on how many belts because one of the fights was not quote unquote regulated, but he won 3 to 4, 2 by knockout, 1 by decision, and that was basically sums up his earlier years of his life before he really became a professional boxer. Live every day like it was your last, because someday you're going to be right. And unfortunately, this is a little weird, but unfortunately his last day was a couple weeks ago, and he lived every day like it was his last. His boxing career shows that he never wasted time on anything, any frivolous activity. He stuck to his work and really trained his hardest to become the best that he could be able to be. I mean, he even gave himself the nickname the Greatest because he knew that he was before he even began. He began in the Olympics in 1960, where he won the gold medal against the Polish fighter. Wasn't able to find the Polish fighter's name. He won 2 fights before the light heavyweight gold medal bout to win the gold. And he was actually hailed as a hero for the American Olympic team due to his gold medal, because he wasn't, before he won, he wasn't known as like the guy that was going to come in and sweep it all through and win. He was known as the guy that was just there, like his first chance to be in the Olympics, the big bright lights. Ali was dubbed the greatest because obviously the way that he talked, he was one of the most articulate human beings, not just athletes, but human beings in general, with the way that he spoke to the media and the way that he spoke to just anybody in general. He was a very articulate person. So he dubbed himself the nickname the greatest after he beat Sonny Liston in a knockout. It was actually his first big fight. He had 2 other fights before this that were pro boxing fights, but not on the caliber of Sonny Liston fight. He also, how he got his name, Muhammad Ali, was when he converted to the Nation of Islam. He changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali. So actually, all the way up until this point that I'm talking about right now, he was Cassius Clay. He won the Olympic medal as Cassius Clay, and then he went to Nation of Islam and changed his name to Muhammad Ali. And for the majority of his boxing career, he was Muhammad Ali. He made the headlines after he made the headlines for boxing. In other news, he made the headlines for going against the Vietnam War. He was one of the most popular persons to really fight against the idea behind the Vietnam War. He got drafted, but then refused to go fight due to his faith and his belief system. He did not allow himself to be able to participate in war. And so he was court-martialed and was actually sentenced to jail. He lost 3 prime years of his boxing career due to this incident, but then came back and made a comeback after the U.S. Justice Department convicted him, and he served his time. He had a couple good fights. This is when his career kind of took the big news with all the fights that he had. He had Frazier, which was the fight of the century, or dubbed the fight of the century. He had the George Foreman fight, actually 2 of the George Foreman fights. One was the Rumble in the Jungle, and the other one was most famously known as the Thrilla in Manila. The first one that he fought against against Joe Frazier, they went toe-to-toe to 14 rounds. Almost, I mean, that's like that's a hard-fought boxing match. At the end, he was knocked down. He recovered, but still got the loss because he was the only of the 2 fighters to get knocked down. Frazier was never knocked down. He then went on to lose 2 more after that, and then he won against George Foreman in one of his fights. And then he had a few more wins in between these major fights, but then the Thrilla in Manila, he was able to reclaim his title. And that's really and that's when he started to like calm down, is after he started fighting George Foreman and everything. Service to others is the rent you pay for the room here on earth. And I feel like this quote really sums up his idea on serving others through his philanthropy. He really thought that it wasn't his right to really be on this earth, so he felt that in order to stay here, you need to serve others as well, especially if you're more fortunate like he was with his boxing career. He felt like he should serve others. He was also known as one of the most cockiest fighters, which is really weird because when you hear a cocky athlete, you don't think of them as being a really humble person down low. And so he also did a lot for others in this way. He also he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and he created a center for his Parkinson's disease. He was also named the Presidential Award for the NAACP for his work with civil rights activism. And he had a few other awards. George W. Bush credited him with the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his work, and that really rounds out his accomplishments through his life. This is my favorite. This is my favorite quote. Impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it. Impossible is fact. Impossible is an opinion. Impossible is not a declaration. Impossible is potential. Impossible is temporary. And impossible is nothing. To summarize, I hope I've answered these questions that you've had about his childhood, his boxing career, and his philanthropy. And I just want to say I want to condole to the parents, or not his parents, but his family, who just lost one of the greatest human beings and athletes that we've ever had in this earth. Thank you very much.